There is a moment in every seeker's life when the familiar outlines of the world no longer hold their previous weight. The objects on the table, the sound of footsteps echoing in a hallway, the faces of strangers passing by all seem to shimmer with a quiet strangeness, as if the surface reality were a thin veil stretched over something vaster, older, and immeasurably profound. This trembling recognition is often the first brush with what many call spiritual awakening. The hidden code behind reality is stirring of the inner eye that begins to suspect there is more to life than what we are told, more than the mechanical succession of days and the endless chain of desires that keep us bound to repetition. To call it spiritual is not merely to confine it to the realm of religion or belief, for spiritual awakening does not belong to dogma, nor does it live in dusty doctrines guarded by gatekeepers of orthodoxy. Instead, it rises like a dawn that cannot be stopped, breaking across the mind and heart with an intensity that is at once exhilarating and terrifying. It is the recognition that reality, as we have been conditioned to perceive it, is coded, layered with hidden architecture, subtle patterns and energies that shape not only the outer events of our lives, but also the inner landscape of thought and emotion. To awaken spiritually is to glimpse that code, to feel its pulse beating beneath appearances, and to realize that the self we thought we were is not the final authority, but a fragment within a grander symphony. The human being has always sensed this hidden code. Ancient traditions wrapped it in myth, cloaked it in allegory, whispered it through initiations and rituals. Shamans spoke of the world of spirits, interwoven with the physical plane. Mystics described ladders of light ascending into the divine, where every rung was a stage of expanded consciousness. Philosophers hinted at an unseen order, a logos that breathes coherence into chaos. And even in our modern scientific age, where equations map the movements of galaxies and quarks, the mystery refuses to dissolve. The more deeply we examine matter, the more it vanishes into vibration, potentiality, and waveforms that bend to the act of observation. Reality itself seems to whisper that it is participatory, that consciousness is not a mere byproduct of neurons, but a fundamental ingredient in the fabric of existence. When one begins the journey of spiritual awakening, this whisper becomes a roar. The world tilts, and what once seemed solid now reveals itself as fluid, malleable, coded. The code is not written in letters or numbers, though both can hint at it. It is written in synchronicities, in archetypes that recur across cultures, in the strange patterns of dreams that seem to teach us more than our waking lives. It is written in the sudden stillness of meditation when thought ceases, and yet awareness expands into an oceanic presence. It is written in suffering, too, for often it is pain, loss, or crisis that cracks the shell of ordinary perception and forces the soul to peer beyond. But this awakening is not merely an escape into abstract wonder. It has practical significance woven into its very heart. To awaken spiritually is to realize that the way we think, the way we feel, the way we hold ourselves in relationship to others, these are not trivial habits, but levers that move reality. The code responds to the frequency we emit. Thoughts, when bound by fear and scarcity, reinforce a reality of confinement. Yet thoughts bathed in openness and trust reconfigure the field, drawing toward us experiences that mirror the resonance of our inner state. Thus, the hidden code behind reality is not simply a theoretical notion. It is a living dynamic, an ever-present invitation to participate consciously in the creation of the life we live. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast tapestry. Up close, the threads appear tangled, chaotic, without reason. But step back, and a pattern emerges, geometries of breathtaking symmetry, colors ranged with purpose. Spiritual awakening is like taking that step back, pulling one's eyes from the immediate and fragmented toward the whole. The pattern reveals that even suffering has its place, that even the darkest threads serve the greater beauty of the design. and with that recognition comes both humility and empowerment. Humility, because we see that we are not the master. Architect, empowerment, because we realize we are not powerless threads, but living weavers who can align with the greater pattern. This hidden code is not external to us. It is not stored in some remote vault of the cosmos, guarded by celestial beings. It hums within us, in the rhythm of our breath, in the electrical dance of neurons, in the silent wisdom of the heart. To awaken is to remember that we are not separate from the field of reality, but expressions of it, each a unique note in the infinite song. The code is both within and beyond us, inviting us to dissolve the illusion of separation and rediscover our essence as awareness itself, timeless, luminous, unbound. And so, the journey of spiritual awakening is not about acquiring something new, but about uncovering what was always there, hidden in plain sight. It is less the addition of knowledge than the peeling away of veils, the slow recognition that the ordinary world is already extraordinary when seen through. Awakened eyes. What once felt like a prison becomes a playground of transformation. What once seemed meaningless becomes saturated with purpose. The code is revealed not by straining or striving, but by attunement, by quieting the noise enough to hear the subtle symphony that has never ceased playing. As we step into this exploration, let us hold the paradox that awakening is both a gift and a responsibility, both a cosmic event and an intimate shift of perception. It asks us to expand beyond the small stories of identity and to embrace the vastness that pulses beneath them. It invites us to engage with life not as passive spectators, but as conscious participants in a reality whose code is waiting to be read, lived, embodied. At the heart of spiritual awakening, the hidden code behind reality lies the recognition that the world is layered with meanings invisible to the unawakened eye. It is not simply that we misinterpret what we see. It is that what we see is itself a mask, a shimmering facade cast by deeper laws and structures. Like actors moving across a stage, events in our lives play out against a backdrop that seems familiar. Yet beneath the stage, there runs a hidden machinery, a choreography of forces guiding the play. To awaken spiritually is to pull back the curtain and glimpse those hidden mechanisms not as abstractions, but as living principles that shape every thought, emotion, and encounter. One of the most profound realizations is that reality is not fixed but fluid, responsive, alive. What appears as a solid, immutable world is more akin to a dream sustained by collective agreement. Each belief we hold, each assumption about who we are and what is possible, becomes a thread in the code that structures our experience. The child who is told they are unworthy grows into an adult who sees unworthiness reflected in every relationship. The seeker who learns that consciousness is primary begins to experience a world shimmering with signs, synchronicities, and possibilities. Thus, awakening unveils the principle that perception and creation are bound together, that the mind does not simply register reality but co-authors it moment by moment. Yet, there's a deeper layer still, the recognition that our ordinary identity, the I that says this is me and that is not me, is itself a construction. It is like a mask worn so long we forget it is a mask at all. Spiritual awakening disrupts this amnesia. It is the startling moment when we realize that the thinker of thoughts is not the true self, but a fragment of a larger awareness. The mind, with its endless commentary, is a tool, not the master. Beneath the chatter there's a silent witness, a field of pure consciousness that does not come and go, that does not age, that remains untouched by the rise and fall of circumstances. To discover this is to encounter the hidden code that shifts reality. The code is not something external to us, it is us, or rather, it is that dimension of our being that transcends form while permeating it. Another core theme is the interplay of illusion and truth. The ancients often described life as a dream, a shadow play, a realm of appearances that seduces the senses but hides the real. Plato spoke of the cave where shadows are mistaken for reality. Eastern mystics spoke of Maya, the grand illusion that veils the eternal. Spiritual awakening is the gradual peeling back of these veils. It is not that the world vanishes, but that its hypnotic hold loosens. We begin to see, through appearances, recognizing that form is temporary, but the essence it carries is timeless. Relationships are no longer mere exchanges of words and gestures. They become mirrors reflecting aspects of the self. Challenges are no longer obstacles alone, but initiations, designed to refine perception and awaken hidden strengths. Even death itself begins to lose its terror, seen not as an end, but as a transition within the infinite cycle of consciousness. At the center of these revelations is energy, the subtle current that underlies all existence. Modern physics hints at it when it describes matter as vibration, fields, and probabilities. Mystics have long spoken of it as prana, kai, or life force in the awakened state. One begins to feel this energy directly. The tingling presence in the body during meditation, the magnetic pull of certain places or people, the way intention can shift the flow of events. To know the code is to learn how energy responds to awareness, how the frequencies we radiate ripple outward into the field, shaping the tapestry of life. This is not mere metaphor. It is a practical law, just as gravity holds planets in orbit. The resonance of consciousness organizes experience around it. Yet awakening is not only about discovering these laws. It is about embodying them. There is a temptation to treat the hidden code as a secret to be exploited, a trick to bend reality to personal desires. But true spiritual awakening carries a different flavor. It dissolves the boundaries of selfish striving and reveals the interconnectedness of all beings. To see the code is to recognize that harming another is harming oneself. That love is not merely a sentiment, but the fundamental fabric binding existence. Compassion, once a moral virtue, becomes a natural expression of alignment with reality's deeper architecture. When we act in harmony with this fabric, life flows with grace. When we act against it, resistance and disharmony rise. Perhaps the most unsettling yet liberating theme is the collapse of certainty. Awakening does not provide all the answers neatly packaged. It dismantles the false answers we once clung to. The ground shifts, familiar identities dissolve, and what remains is an openness, a space vast enough to hold paradox. In that openness, reality becomes less about control and more about participation, less about rigid truth and more about living inquiry. This is why many describe awakening as both terrifying and ecstatic. It is the death of the old self and the birth of a deeper presence, a presence that sees not with the eyes of fear but with the eyes of wonder. In this way, the core of spiritual awakening is not a doctrine but a lived recognition that reality is coded with meaning, that consciousness is the key to reading and rewriting the code, and that awakening is the act of stepping into that recognition with courage and humility. It is the beginning of living as a conscious co-creator rather than a passive dreamer, a participant in the unfolding mystery rather than a prisoner of appearances. If the essence of spiritual awakening, the hidden code behind reality, is the unveiling of hidden laws, then its stories are the bridges that carry us from abstract truths into lived understanding. Symbols are the language of the soul, and narratives, whether ancient myths, parables, or simple metaphors, carry truths too vast for a literal speech. When we enter these stories, we enter a mirror of ourselves, for each tale is not about gods or heroes alone, but about the inner journey of awakening. Consider the ancient image of the serpent shedding its skin. Across cultures, this symbol recurs, the snake that appears, threatening yet embodies transformation. To shed its skin is to let go of what has become too tight, too confining. So too with the self. Awakening demands that we strip away identities that once protected us but now imprison us. The shedding is not painless. The snake must scrape against rough stones, rubbing away the old until the new emerges. Likewise, When we awaken, the friction of life challenges us, forcing us to confront the illusions we cling to. But once released, we step into a freedom that feels like rebirth. The serpent teaches that endings are not failures but gateways into higher forms of being. There is also the timeless story of the phoenix, the bird that burns itself to ash only to rise anew from its own fire. This narrative is a luminous symbol of the awakening process. Before transformation, there is destruction, the crumbling of identities, beliefs, and structures that no longer serve. Many who walk this path describe a dark night of the soul, when everything familiar falls apart and the world seems stripped of meaning. But in that very collapse lies the seed of renewal. The fire does not consume to annihilate, it consumes to refine, to purify, to make space for the birth of a deeper self. The phoenix rises not in spite of the fire but because of it, and so too does the awakened one emerge radiant from the crucible of suffering. Another allegory lies in the image of a mirror. The mystics say the world is a mirror, reflecting not itself but the consciousness that beholds it. If one gazes with fear, the world reflects danger. If one gazes with love, the world reflects beauty. Spiritual awakening is the realization that every person encountered is also a mirror, showing us hidden aspects of ourselves. The enemy who provokes anger reveals our own shadow. The beloved who evokes joy reveals our own capacity for love. To recognize the mirror is to take responsibility for a perception, to cease blaming the reflection, and instead polish the lens of awareness. This is the code. Change within, and without begins to change. The labyrinth is another enduring symbol, unlike a maze designed to confuse. The labyrinth has one path that winds inward to a center and outward again. Walking it requires trust, for at times the path bends away from the goal, leading us in circles, but every twist is part of the design. Every apparent detour carries us closer to the heart. Life, too, often feels like a labyrinth. We wonder why we are diverted, why challenges rise, why desires are delayed. But awakening reveals that nothing is wasted, that even the detours are steps within the larger geometry. The hidden code is written into the labyrinth itself, and walking it with awareness turns wandering into pilgrimage. Perhaps the most profound symbolic narrative is that of light and shadow. From the dawn of human imagination, light has symbolized truth, awakening, the divine, while shadow has represented ignorance, fear, and illusion. Yet awakening reveals that shadow is not the enemy of light, but its necessary counterpart. Without darkness, light has no meaning. Without shadow, depth cannot be perceived. In our own lives, the shadow represents those aspects of the self we deny or repress, the emotions and desires we deem unacceptable. Spiritual awakening invites us not to flee from shadow, but to integrate it, to recognize that wholeness includes both radiance and darkness, just as the yin-yang symbol holds black within white and white within black. So does true awakening embrace opposites. The hidden code behind reality is not duality alone, but the harmony that rises from it. These stories, serpent, phoenix, mirror, labyrinth, light and shadow, are not mere myths. They are living patterns that play out within every seeker. Each symbolizes a stage, a lesson, a key in the unfolding process of awakening. To encounter them is to encounter ourselves, for the path is not out there but within. And beyond these symbols lies a universal narrative. The journey of the soul is an infinite traveler, from birth to death, from ignorance to awareness, from separation to union. We walk a story older than time. Spiritual awakening is the moment we remember we are not merely characters lost in the plot but co-authors, participants in a cosmic tale. The code is written not only in sacred texts but in our very lives. Every challenge is a parable, every coincidence a whisper, every cycle a chapter. To read these narratives with awakened eyes is to step into a larger story where nothing is random and everything is meaningful. The power of symbolic narratives lies in their ability to bypass the logical mind and speak directly to the heart. They remind us that awakening is not about acquiring more information, but about transformation, about shifting the very way we perceive and participate in reality. And when we embody these stories, they cease to be metaphors and become lived truths. We become the serpent shedding, the phoenix rising, the mirror reflecting, the traveler in the labyrinth. The union of light and shadow. To contemplate spiritual awakening, the hidden code behind reality is myth, symbol, or cosmic narrative is profound. But awakening does not end in the realm of philosophy. Its truest power is revealed in how it reshapes the daily texture of life, how it infuses ordinary choices, relationships, and actions with the resonance of deeper awareness. If the earlier sections have explored what awakening is, this is where we explore what awakening does. How does a shift in perception ripple into work, family, society, and even the body itself? How does deciphering the hidden code translate into lived wisdom rather than abstract ideals? The first integration is in the way we see ourselves. Most of us carry invisible scripts written long before we knew we were actors on life's stage scripts of limitation, doubt, or expectation inherited from family, culture, or society. Awakening disrupts those scripts by illuminating their origins. We begin to ask, who wrote these lines I have been reciting? Do they reflect the truth of who I am? In daily life, this recognition is radical. A person who once lived in quiet resignation may suddenly feel called to create, to speak, to lead, to love more authentically. The transformation is not always dramatic in outward appearance, but inwardly it is seismic. The hidden code, once recognized, empowers us to choose not as victims of programming, but as conscious authors of our roles. Relationships, too, undergo a profound recalibration in the unawakened state. Relationships are often fueled by projection, expectation, and unconscious patterns. We cling, we blame, we seek validation, and in doing so, we repeat cycles of pain. But with awakening comes the realization that every encounter is a mirror, that the dynamics we experience with others are reflections of energies within ourselves. Instead of asking, why is this person treating me this way? We begin to ask, what in me is resonating with this dynamic? Such inquiry shifts blame into responsibility, conflict into growth, and even heartbreak into initiation. Love ceases to be a bargaining chip for security and becomes an expression of alignment with truth. The awakened relationship is less about possession and more about resonance, two beings walking parallel paths, supporting but not consuming each other, reflecting light without extinguishing individuality. In practical terms, awakening also reshapes how we relate to work and purpose. Modern culture often teaches that work is primarily about survival, success, or status, but awakening reframes it as an arena for expression and service. The hidden code whispers that true fulfillment rises not from accumulation but from alignment, aligning what we do with who we are. When we act from alignment, even simple tasks carry meaning. A teacher guiding students, a healer tending to patients, an artist shaping beauty from silence all become vehicles for the universe to know itself through us. This does not mean everyone must abandon careers or renounce ambition, but it does mean ambition shifts in flavor, less about conquest, more about contribution, less about recognition, more about resonance. Another realm where awakening takes root is in how we face challenges without awareness of the code. Suffering feels arbitrary, a punishment dealt by fate. But with awakening, suffering is reframed as initiation, as the serpent's stone that scrapes away the old skin, as the phoenix's fire that burns the husk to reveal the radiant core. Practical integration means that when difficulties rise, we no longer ask only, how can I escape this pain? But also, what is this pain revealing? What doorway might this struggle conceal? Such questions do not eliminate hardship, but they transmute it, turning obstacles into allies, wounds into wisdom. Life becomes less about avoiding storms, and more about learning to dance with their winds on a societal level. The implications are vast. Imagine a culture where spiritual awakening is not dismissed as esoteric, but recognized as essential to human flourishing. Education would not only fill minds with data, but also cultivate awareness of inner life. Economics would not measure wealth solely in material accumulation, but also in harmony, creativity, and well-being. Justice would not be about punishment alone, but about restoring balance, recognizing the unseen roots of behavior. Though such a vision may seem distant, every individual who awakens contributes to its emergence, for collective structures are nothing more than multiplied individuals, and each shift in awareness ripples outward. A single awakened perspective in a family, community, or workplace has the power to alter the entire field. Even the body is not untouched. Science increasingly affirms what mystics long declared. The mind and body are not separate, and consciousness exerts profound influence on health. Awakening often brings a new sensitivity to the body's rhythms, a recognition that breath is not mechanical, but sacred, that food is not merely fuel but energy, that rest is not idleness but renewal. Practices like meditation, yoga, or mindful breathing cease to be exotic rituals and become natural extensions of living in harmony with the code. Illness, too, may be seen in a new light, not as a failure of the body alone, but as a message, a teacher pointing to imbalance or misalignment. In this sense, awakening invites us to inhabit the body not as a cage, but as a temple, a vessel through which spirit dances in matter. Practical integration does not mean life becomes easy. In truth, awakening often complicates life, for illusions once ignored now demand attention. Old relationships may fall away, careers may shift, long-suppressed feelings may surface. But beneath the turbulence runs a deeper current of clarity. We no longer navigate blindly, but with an inner compass attuned to resonance. Each choice becomes an act of alignment or misalignment, and in this awareness lies freedom. Ultimately, the real-world implication of awakening is this: we begin to live as though everything matters, not in the sense of burden or anxiety, but in the sense of reverence. The morning sun, the stranger's smile, the silence between breaths, these small things become luminous, reminders that reality is not random but woven with meaning. To live in this way is to participate consciously in the cosmic dance, to see oneself not as a fragment lost in chaos, but as a note in a symphony, unique yet inseparable from the whole. To stand before the mystery of spiritual awakening, the hidden code behind reality is to stand before a mirror that reflects not only who we are, but who we have always been beneath the veils. From the serpent and the phoenix to the dream and the mirror, we have traced the symbols, myths, and lived implications of awakening. Yet no amount of reading, listening, or pondering can substitute for the moment when the code is felt not as theory, but as undeniable reality. Awakening is not about escaping life, nor about transcending humanity. It is about inhabiting life more fully, recognizing humanity as divine in disguise. It is not an achievement to boast about, nor a badge to display, but a quiet revolution of perception. When the eyes shift from illusion to truth, the world remains the same in form, yet utterly transformed in essence. What once seemed ordinary is revealed as sacred. What once seemed separate is seen as inseparable. What once seemed fixed becomes fluid, alive, and endlessly unfolding. And so the call of awakening is not simply to understand the hidden code, but to live it, to carry the insight from meditation cushion to workplace, from sacred text to kitchen table, from moments of solitude to the heart of relationship. Awakening becomes not a destination, but a practice, an ongoing dance between forgetting and remembering, between falling asleep and reawakening. Each day offers countless opportunities to choose awareness over automation, compassion over reaction, resonance over fear. The truth is simple, yet its implications are infinite. The code is not Outside us, it was never locked away in some distant temple or arcane scripture. It lives in the breath, in the gaze, in the stillness between thoughts. It waits patiently for us to notice, to surrender, to trust. And when we do, reality itself responds, reshaping not only how we see, but what we create. Thus, the final invitation is both gentle and urgent. Pause, listen, look again. Beneath the surface of your daily life, the code is shimmering. Beneath the noise of the world, the truth is whispering. Beneath the mask of who you think you are, your infinite self is waiting. To awaken is not to become something new, but to remember what has always been true.